My wife promised her son my business without telling me. Now he's graduated and demanding I hand it over. I'm 52, and I married my wife, who's 50, about 2 years ago after we'd been dating for 3. She has a son, Joe, who's 21 now, from her previous marriage. He just graduated recently with a business degree. Joe and I get along fine. We're not exactly best buddies, and there's no real father-son bond between us either. His dad is still around and very much involved in his life, so it's not like he's been missing a father figure. Now, here's where things get complicated. My wife apparently promised Joe that once he finished college, he'd be taking over my business. I own a moderately successful catering company, something I inherited from my father after he passed. I've been running it solo for nearly 2 decades now, not counting the years I spent working side by side with my dad before it officially became mine. And let me be clear, I have no plans to step away from it anytime soon. Retirement's still a long way off for me. To be honest, I have no clue why my wife thought it made sense to promise Joe something so big without even running it by me first. It came out of the blue. Just last week, we were at his graduation party. Later that evening, he treated us to dinner, and that's when this whole situation unfolded. While we were digging into dessert, Joe casually brought up how he didn't need to stress about internships or job hunting like the rest of his friends because, as he put it, he already had a solid plan lined up. Then he flashed me this confident smile. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I smiled back politely and glanced at my wife, expecting her to explain. She didn't say a word. We just finished the meal and headed out. Joe had plans to stay the night with some college buddies at their apartment, so it was just the 2 of us in the car afterward. On the drive home, I asked her what Joe meant when he said he had a plan in place. That's when she admitted that, before he even left for college, she'd kind of told him that I'd be handing over my business once he got his degree. I was floored. I told her right then and there that she needed to come clean with him, because there was no way I was turning over the company to someone that young and inexperienced. I explained that, frankly, I might never give it to him. I've got longtime employees, loyal, capable people who've worked hard and actually earned that kind of trust. Joe, on the other hand, just graduated. He's still green, and I don't think he's anywhere close to ready for the pressure that comes with running a business. I said maybe he could intern or work under me for a while, and if he proved himself, then we could talk about expanding his role. But as for taking over? Not happening anytime soon. She didn't take that well. She got really upset and told me I was being selfish, that I wasn't giving Joe a fair chance. She insisted that she believed in him, that he could succeed if I just let him try. I pushed back and said this wasn't some experiment. This business was built by my father, and then passed down to me to protect and grow. This isn't something you try. Either you're ready or you're not, and Joe, in my opinion, just isn't there yet. I told her, kids his age need real-world experience before they can take on something this big. He should be working somewhere first, getting his hands dirty. If he proved himself there, then maybe, just maybe, he could join me in the business, but not take over. As soon as I said that, she completely lost it. She started yelling at me, saying I wasn't acting like a father and that I only cared about myself. That's when I said, bluntly, that I wasn't his father. I never claimed to be, so I didn't see why I had to play that role, especially when I was left out of such a major decision. She got so angry that she asked me to pull over. We were only a couple blocks from home, so I did. She climbed out and walked the rest of the way. I didn't follow her either, I was too upset. I needed time to cool down, so I headed to a bar for a couple drinks. I got back around midnight. By then, she was already asleep, so we didn't talk about anything that night. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened, so I didn't bring it up again either. But 2 days later, Joe called me. He wanted to talk about the business. I told him straight up that his mom had never talked to me about any of this. If she had, she would have known I wasn't planning to hand the business over. I told him that he needed to look for a job like everyone else because what his mother had told him just wasn't going to happen. At first, he thought I was joking. I had to make it very clear that I wasn't. And thinking back, there were definitely a few times over the past couple of years when he dropped hints about taking over, but I always assumed he was just messing around. If I'd known my wife had made a promise, I would have set the record straight a long time ago. After I told him no, he absolutely blew up. He accused me of breaking promises and being selfish, just like his mother. Then he hung up before I could even say a word in my defense. I was at work when this all happened, so I didn't mention it to my wife right away. I figured I'd talk to her when I got home. But the second I walked through the door, before I could even take off my coat, she came at me furious. Apparently, Joe had called her right after talking to me and went off on her for lying and leading him on. She turned around and blamed me, saying it was all my fault because now Joe didn't trust us and was cutting us both out of his life. I told her that none of this was on me. I never made Joe any promises, and I sure as hell didn't promise anything to her that I didn't keep. She was the one who lied to him. I said that if my own mother had made up a lie like that and let me believe it for years, I probably wouldn't want anything to do with her either. That set her off again. She burst into tears, grabbed her things, and said she was going to stay with her sister for a while. I didn't try to stop her, I was still too angry to even think straight. Honestly, I still don't see how this mess is somehow my fault. She walked out that day, and it's been 3 days since, still no sign of her coming back. We haven't talked at all. I haven't called her, and she hasn't reached out either. It's been complete silence on both sides. Yesterday, my phone rang, and for a moment I thought maybe she was finally calling me. But it turned out to be her older sister. She didn't waste any time letting me have it, scolding me over how I'd been acting. She told me my wife had been absolutely miserable since she left, crying nonstop and feeling like she was losing not just her son, but now her husband too. I'll admit, hearing that hit me hard. The last thing I ever wanted was to be the reason my wife was sitting somewhere in tears. Her sister went on to explain that the reason my wife made that promise to Joe in the first place was because, back when he was about to finish high school, he had no plans to go to college. Apparently, he wanted to join a band and give music a try instead. But she wanted him to get a degree, and in her desperation, she told him that if he graduated, he could take over my business. That was her way of motivating him. She didn't bring it up with me back then because she already knew how I'd respond. I'd have said no. She assumed, though, that once Joe had a diploma and had matured, I might see him differently and change my mind. She had even thought about talking to me about it over the years, but just never got around to it. She felt awkward, maybe even guilty, because it wasn't really her place to decide anything about my business, especially since Joe isn't my son. I told her sister I understood why my wife did what she did. I could see that it all came from a place of love and worry for her kid's future. But even so, I said it didn't excuse her lying, to Joe or to me. Her sister said she didn't want to interfere in our marriage, but she just wanted me to know that my wife was still committed to working things out if I was willing to apologize. She said my wife was open to reconciliation, but needed to hear me say sorry for being so harsh with both her and Joe. Then she hung up, leaving me to sit there and think everything over. And I really did think. A part of me truly wanted to fix things between us. I missed her, and I hated fighting like this. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't do anything wrong. I hadn't made that promise. She had. So why was I the one who needed to apologize? It's been a full day since that phone call, and I'm still stuck trying to figure out what to do. I asked myself, was I the jerk for telling Joe the truth? For shutting down an idea that was never even run past me? Update 1. After reading through the advice and comments, I decided not to apologize. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I really wasn't at fault here. If my wife wanted to convince Joe to go to college, there were so many other ways she could have done it. Better, smarter ways. But instead, she chose to lie to him about something that wasn't even hers to offer. And even after that, she had years to bring it up to me, to try to clear things up before it turned into a mess. But she didn't. So now, if she wants this marriage to work, she's the one who needs to come forward and take responsibility. I'm done being the one who always bends and apologizes just to keep the peace. It's been almost a week since she walked out, and I still haven't heard anything from her. I have no clue where her head's at or what she's planning, but one thing I do know is that I'm not going to grovel this time. She's the one who caused all this chaos. It's on her to make it right. And I want to say thanks to everyone who helped talk me through this. It helped me clear my head. Because honestly, this always happens, she messes up, and I'm the one left chasing after her to patch things up. Well, not this time. I'm done carrying the whole weight of this relationship on my shoulders. Update 2. It's been nearly 2 weeks since she left. We still hadn't spoken. I was this close to calling a lawyer because I truly didn't think she was coming back. But then, earlier today, around noon, she walked through the door. She hasn't said much yet. Barely anything, really. But she did tell me she was sorry for how she acted, and for now, that's enough for me. I don't know where things stand between her and Joe. From the way she looks heartbroken and distant, I'm guessing they haven't made up. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I can call it a fight between them. It's more like she told a lie, and now that Joe knows the truth, he wants nothing to do with her. I hate to say it, but I can't blame him. She's back home now, but everything still feels tense and quiet between us. Joe's blocked me, and I'm not sure if he's cut off his mom too. If he has, then maybe that's why she's been so down, because she can't even apologize to him properly. If she asks for advice, and I hope she does, I'll probably suggest she try reaching out through one of Joe's friends. Maybe ask someone to pass along a message. It might be a little awkward for him, but at least it'd open a line of communication. I don't even know what Joe's dad thinks about all this. My wife hasn't said a word about him or whether he's involved. Honestly, I'm curious what other people think about her plan to get Joe into college. I mean, technically, it worked, he graduated. But now he's furious and won't speak to her. So in a way, it completely backfired. It's sad, really. I know how much she loves Joe. She wanted him to have a good future, and college was a big part of that dream. But now, everything's fallen apart. And whether she wants to admit it or not, this mess is entirely on her. Update 3. It's been 2 days since she came back, and the house still feels heavy, like we're both walking on eggshells. She's been quiet, distant, not like herself at all. But today, we finally sat down and had a real conversation. We had to. It was time to talk through everything that's happened since Joe's graduation. She finally opened up and told me she was sorry for making that promise to Joe without ever asking if I was okay with it. I told her it was alright, figuring that would be the end of the conversation. But instead, she completely broke down. Out of nowhere, the tears started pouring, and she just fell apart right there in front of me. I was caught off guard, but I wrapped my arms around her, trying to calm her down. It didn't help much, she kept sobbing and trembling for nearly an hour straight. Through her crying, she kept repeating that she was sorry for disappointing everyone, how she felt like she'd failed, not just as a mom, but as a wife too. Hearing her say that crushed me. I started feeling awful for not checking in on her while she was staying with her sister. I mean, yeah, this whole mess started because of her decision, but she's still my wife. I should have tried to be there for her in some way. It was clear she'd been going through more than I realized. After she finally ran out of tears and her breathing steadied, I asked her if there was anything I could do to help her feel better. She told me the only thing she really wanted right now was to talk to Joe, to try to fix things with him. But, just like I had guessed, he'd blocked her on everything. She didn't even have contact info for any of his friends to try and reach out. She said she had even tried calling his father, her ex, but he told her flat out that Joe didn't want to talk to her. He also said he wouldn't be helping her fix the situation, since she was the one who caused it and needed to clean it up herself. So I told her I'd try to help. I sat down and started digging around online, doing a little harmless stalking on social media to figure out who Joe still kept in touch with. I remembered one guy he always seemed close with, and after a bit of searching, I found his profile. I sent the guy a message, explaining the situation as simply and politely as I could. I told him we were hoping he'd help us get in touch with Joe, even just to pass along a message. All I asked was for a phone call, something, anything. About an hour later, my wife's phone rang. The number wasn't one she recognized, but we had a feeling. Sure enough, it was Joe on the other end. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I could hear my wife's side of it clearly. She kept apologizing, over and over. It was heartbreaking in a way, because I know how deeply she loves him. They talked for a while, but it got heated fast. She tried explaining why she'd done what she did, how she believed one day he'd be glad to have that degree, and that she only lied because she thought it was the only way to make him take college seriously. Then she said, straight up, that if she had to do it all over again, she would, just to keep him on the right path. That's when things started unraveling. Her face turned red, her neck blotchy. I could tell things weren't going as she'd hoped. I tried to signal to her to end the call and revisit the talk later, but they kept going. Before long, it exploded into full-on shouting. I could hear Joe yelling from the other end, and my wife shouting right back, just as loud, just as harsh. I'd never heard her speak like that to anyone, let alone her own son. She called him some awful things and ended the conversation by telling him he was just like his father. When she hung up, she was shaking and hysterical. For about 15 minutes, she just vented raging about how disgusted she was by Joe. I didn't interrupt. I let her get it all out. She clearly needed to release that anger. Once she calmed down a little, I gently asked what exactly had been said on the call. She told me Joe had called her a liar, which she admitted was true, and she had apologized to him for that. But then he went further, saying she was a terrible mother and that she'd ruined his life by forcing him into college instead of letting him pursue his dream of becoming a musician. He accused her of crushing his passion, said he could have made something of himself with his band, and told her he never wanted to speak to her again. He even said she was one of the most selfish and heartless people he knew. That's when she snapped. She said everything she had done was for Joe's own good. And honestly, I believe her. As much as it hurt him, I know she never meant to cause harm. She genuinely thought she was setting him up for a better life. She told me that, as hard as it might be to hear, Joe was never really that talented. He was tone-deaf and not particularly skilled, and even the kids he used to be in the band with had moved on to other paths. He was the only one still clinging to the dream. And this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. She said her ex-husband used to accuse her of the same thing, of being unsupportive, when all she'd done was warn him against sinking money into a new business when his old one was already failing. That caused constant fighting, and eventually, their marriage fell apart. That's what she meant when she told Joe he was just like his father. She explained to me later that all she ever tried to do was look out for her son, to guide him, to stop him from making choices that might hurt his future. But now, she said, it felt like there was no point. In her eyes, he was too blind to see what was good for him and what wasn't. She told me that if Joe wanted to turn her into the villain in his life story, then so be it. She was done trying to fix things. She was exhausted, sick of being blamed every time something went wrong in Joe's life, or in her ex-husband's, for that matter. It had been an emotionally draining day for her. Still, I was proud of her for at least trying to patch things up, even if it didn't go the way she'd hoped. She'd made a mistake, sure, but she owned it and made an honest attempt to set things right. If Joe or his father couldn't see that, then that was on them. She'd calmed down quite a bit by dinner, and we managed to eat together without any more talk about Joe or her ex. She went to bed early, and as I write this, she's asleep. I'm really hoping that by tomorrow, she'll feel a little lighter, like some of this weight has finally lifted. Update 4. Hey everyone, almost a week has passed since that phone call between my wife and her son. They haven't spoken since. But today, out of the blue, she got a call from her ex-husband. He told her that Joe wanted to talk and asked her to come over to his house. Alone. He said it was a family matter, and I wasn't welcome. Apparently, I wasn't considered part of the family. My wife, though, wasn't having any of that. She told him flat out either I was coming with her, or she wasn't going at all. She wasn't about to walk into that house alone and deal with all their nonsense by herself. Eventually, they agreed to let me come along. But they made it clear that I wasn't to be involved in the actual conversation. That was fine by me. I had no interest in getting into a back and forth with Joe or his dad. When we got to the house, it felt like they were waiting to interrogate her. The energy in the room was tense, Joe and his dad sitting there with straight faces, like they were getting ready for court or something. Maybe they thought they could intimidate her, but that wasn't going to work. My wife doesn't rattle easily. We all sat down in the living room, and Joe didn't waste any time. He came right out and said that since she had forced him to go to college and waste 3 years of his life doing something he had zero interest in, it was now time for her to make good on her promise to convince me to hand over my business to him. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to get involved, but I couldn't let that slide. I jumped in and asked him straight up if he was out of his mind. There was no way I was giving him my business, not now, not ever. And it didn't even matter if he was ready because by this point, I just didn't like him. He's not my son, and I don't owe him anything. I told him that right to his face. That's when his father jumped in, told me to shut the hell up and reminded me that I wasn't part of this conversation. That pissed me off, honestly. This was my business they were talking about. Of course I had a say. We argued for a bit, but my wife quickly stepped in and told me to let it go, that it wasn't worth it. She was right. So I backed off and just gave the guy a death stare and kept my mouth shut. Joe, on the other hand, kept pushing. He told my wife that if she didn't talk to me and make me change my mind soon, he'd cut her off completely. I expected her to falter, to waver. But she didn't, and I couldn't have been prouder. She looked him in the eye and told him she wasn't going to do any such thing. If he didn't want to appreciate the fact that she helped set him up with a college education and a future, then fine. But he couldn't go around making demands like that. She apologized again for the lie, but made it clear that was the only apology he was getting. She said she'd done what she did out of love, out of concern for his future. And if he couldn't see that, if he still chose to treat her like the enemy, then maybe it really was better for him to cut her off. Then Joe's dad stepped in and tried to threaten her with legal action. Said he'd take her to court if she didn't honor her promise. My wife burst out laughing. She asked him if he really thought any lawyer would take that case seriously when there was no written agreement, no contract, no proof, just words. He didn't have a response to that. Just got red in the face and told her to get out of his house. So we did. Even as we were walking back to the car, Joe made sure to yell one last insult at her, said she was a terrible mother. We didn't react. We just got in the car and drove off, wanting to get as far away from that house as possible. Now we're home. It's quiet. And honestly, we're hoping this whole mess has finally reached its end. That maybe, just maybe, we won't have to deal with Joe or her ex again. Because today was nothing but a massive waste of time and emotional energy.